first episode of NOCTalk, where we pull back the curtain on conferences and events to learn everything technology in the network world. I'm Joe Fostock, Director of Event Technology at Xpodigital, and I'm joined today with our network engineer and project manager, Corey White and Seth Vogt. So these guys bring years and years of experience. I'm super excited that they're able to join us today to kind of go over some questions that we can better arm our clients with when they go into a venue to help negotiating and to really have a little bit more education behind the scenes. So guys, thanks so much for being on NOCTalk today. First things first, let's just introduce yourselves and explain why we should even listen to anything that you have to say.
Well, I guess I can jump off on that. So I've been in hospitality and events for quite a long time, since late 90s. Focus on engineering and network connectivity since early 2000. So 2002, I got my start here in Orlando, and I've been doing it ever since. So we have a lot of background and history within our company that shows our experience and our expertise in what we do. So I like to think that I know what's going on sometimes, but we're never complacent. So we're always learning something. But we also have that experience backing to talk to it on a comfort level.
Innovation is key in any industry, so always evolving. Seth.
I am Seth Vogt, Senior Project Manager here at Xpodigital, and I've been in this business since, good Lord, since, let's say, 1990.
Get your fingers out.
1997. I started doing audio-visual for a couple hotels around, and then kind of worked my way into doing IT. And then was made an offer I couldn't refuse, and been with this company for quite a long time, kind of since they started really getting involved in doing a lot of the hotels around the Orlando area, and then moving out into all these trade shows that we do all over the country. So started out doing AV, went in the speaker ready room. So I've got a good experience in all of that before I got into working IT events.
And you've been a part of Xpodigital's team for how long?
Officially, I'd say 8 years, but I've been freelancing for them since 1999, since when the founder asked me to go pick up a couple of switches at one of the hotels, and then it kind of escalated from there.
The founder being the godfather that made you an offer you can't refuse, I suppose.
Yes.
And Corey, how about you?
Oh, what was that question again?
How long have you been with the team?
So I've been with Xpodigital now year 10, I believe. Yeah, we're going into year 10, 2015,
Awesome.
my official hire.
So continuity is also key. We have a lot of clients that we travel coast to coast with, and the expectation is to have that continuity between who's showing up and who knows the product and who knows the people and how they like things done. So that's awesome. Really do appreciate that, guys. So now that we know a little bit about your background, let's kind of jump into things. Let's start with a reality check. Let's go with the fact that most attendees expect Wi-Fi to just work. Right? So we know that there's so much happening behind the scenes. What's the biggest misconception event planners have when it comes to setting up network infrastructure?
Well, I think from an engineering standpoint, the biggest misconception going into any venue, whether it be small events, hotel style, or major conference centers, is that the people working in those venues 24/7 actually have the knowledge and expertise behind their own network. A lot of times what you run into on site is you're gonna run into staff that is very personable and customer focused, but they don't necessarily have the knowledge or even the ability to troubleshoot really any kind of complex problem that may arise during an event. The other aspect of that is it's really locked down for those individuals, and they always have to call somebody else for support, whether it might be somebody on site. Most of the time in our experience, it's somebody that's not even in the area, maybe not even in the state. So that's the biggest misconception I can see. The other part of that might go hand in hand is a lot of these venues will use the equipment that is installed as long as possible and not invest in that upkeep, and even invest in the updates and technology that come. A lot of the venues we reach are probably 5-10-year-old equipment's been installed in there, and they're not trying to keep up with the latest and greatest technology that is rolling out.
I think that's a really good point because, a lot of people, when they try to bring in a third-party partner, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? So we have clients that we come into older properties and we supplement what they have in-house. So we do the keynote or we do the breakout rooms or things like that. So I think that's also a misconception that when you bring in a third-party vendor that they have to do everything. Obviously, it's best for us to do everything because we can monitor from beginning to end and ensure that everything is going, swimmingly. But if the hotel or convention center is giving pushback, that's certainly something that's a little bit more fluid, I would say. Can you share a real world example of when a lack of planning caused major issues and how a proactive approach can be a way to avoid that?
You want to go logistics or do you want to go technical on that? I think that we have a few
Yeah.
we can reference.
I mean, the reasons that we were brought in when something's failed, right? I'd say there was a property in one of the larger cities that we've worked in, and their complete infrastructure failed in a conference that was for one of the bigger communication companies out there, right? And there was no backup, so they were dead in the water for 3 days.
Wow.
And the bonus was we got brought in after that. We've been with this partner for going on 4 years now, but there was no redundancy. There was nothing there. It was just, this was what we have, and this is what didn't work. And the streaming, everything failed for this client. So that's a huge thing to look at, what is involved for having redundancy around for anything.
I think it's a good point too. So as we're looking at pro tips and ways that we're preparing our event marketers, our planners, our production companies, questions to ask is, when was the last time that your technology equipment was updated? I think it's a valid question. Again, if there's some of these older venues that have that charm, they probably don't have that coverage or the equipment that is needed. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a very good detection for any venue vetting would be, hey, can you provide us your topology? Can you provide us with the vendor you're using that's permanently installed here? When was your last major refresh for the building? What is your design capacity? What is your density capacity for larger events? And if they're unwilling to share that kind of information, then you know right off the bat that they know that you're knowledgeable enough to be asking the right questions, and that they are now caught in a hard spot of giving out too much information and letting you know that either A, they are lacking in certain areas, or B, they just don't really know what to respond with.
And a lot of times, clients or even just colleagues will loop us into conversations and say, does this look right? And I think that's a really important thing to do, is to have a technology counsel on your side. Just trusted colleagues that you can say, I feel weird about this, or this doesn't seem right, but having those questions to go into the venue, I think that's a game changer. And a lot of people would never know to ask for those things. So thank you for bringing those up. I want to talk solutions for a second. If an event planner or marketer is sourcing a venue, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are the top 3 questions that they should be asking about internet and connectivity? I know we kind of just touched on it a little bit, but is there anything else that you think would be something to highlight?
I mean, from an engineering standpoint, it would be what we just touched on.
Yeah.
What I would add to that, though, is a extension to that is, what is your failover and disaster recovery plan? Like, if the worst was to happen, we've got 40,000 people here, or we have 1,000 people, and the internet has just died. What are we going to do to fix it, and how long is it going to take?
Yeah.
Do you have the people on site that can do that? Do you need to bring somebody here? Because this is a concern. We've had an experience possibly in the past. We want the reassurance that this is going to be handled, and it's not going to be a time delayed type of option, because as anybody knows, once the internet goes down, whether you're on it for business or personal purposes, the client and meeting planners are going to hear it.
I can say this out of experience, because yesterday at our office, these guys were playing around and testing some things out, and the entire network went down on purpose. I will say.
Only the wireless. Yeah. The network still was up. I want to be very clear. The network was still working.
The wireless went down. And so everybody jumps out of their office and they're like, what's happening? And I joke, and this is not really a joke, but internet is like air. Like, if you don't have it, you don't have it. So it's definitely something that has to go both ways. Anything to add, Seth, as far as, top things that we should be asking about?
I think also making sure that if they have a venue, are they able to segment the network for specifics, as far as can they provide a certain amount for streaming, a certain amount for general Wi-Fi, for anybody doing a demo? Just do they have that capability?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, production.
Yeah.
And is it dedicated, right? Like, do we have a dedicated
Yeah, that's a huge one.
bandwidth, or is this shared with the guy at the pool that's streaming on Netflix? Like, that's just things that we may not be asking, but definitely things that are game changers for sure. Because a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, well, we have a gig. Is it my gig, or
Right.
is it
Yeah.
is it him? Who am I sharing it with?" And I think that's an important thing. If I'm going to be paying for something, I want to make sure that it's mine, right? What are some easy wins planners can implement before the event to avoid network issues?
Besides using us and
Yeah, well,
handle it for 'em?
yeah, a network partner
Yeah.
can definitely.
Yeah, definitely a partner, even if it's somebody on staff that you have is dedicated and knowledgeable enough to speak to it. Because, as we know, these meeting planners are in 1,000 directions, handling
Yeah.
1,000 different things from logistics, F&B, room nights, transportation. So technology is just one of those things. They're like, I just hope it works, and I hope these people know what they're doing. So even if you don't have an external partner that can come in and even answer those questions for you to make you feel better, whether it's doing the network for you or just getting that vetting process done, having somebody on staff that can take that off, because it no matter what kind of industry you're in, internet and technology is going to be one of your major headaches when it comes to planning and making sure that it runs smoothly.
But when you have that trusted partner, it can be like one of our clients that is just easy. It's the one thing I don't have to think about because I have way too many other things to think about. And that's the biggest compliment that I think we can have. Seth, anything else that you want to add?
I'd say just to ask the right questions. When connectivity is going to be available once they actually are granted access for their group, just because we need to be the first people in and almost the last people out at the end, because we're providing data, and if they can't communicate, then they are not able to communicate with any of their other vendors, and the other vendors that are actually involved in the conference are never going to have the bandwidth that they need. From as soon as you walk in, they need to have connectivity.
Right. Yeah. We just did a show on the beach. So, and this is a big topic too. A lot of planners and event marketers are looking to get out of the ballroom and have these really niche experiential kind of events. So we did the one at the train station in Indy. We did the one on the beach in Miami. We've done the desert in Tucson. So, I mean, as these folks are getting out of these permanent infrastructures, this is where having a partner like this can really help you to elevate the entire experience for your attendees as well. Have you guys ever been a part of a super cool event that was not in a ballroom that you want to share?
You just rattled them all off.
I know, that's why I wanted to go first.
Oh no, we did one tour. This was a while ago, and every venue was unique, and there was a different venue every other night. And there were a couple of bars, there was an abandoned church, there was a fire station, and just to be able to put connectivity into an area that isn't typically used for that is definitely something exciting, stressful.
Yeah.
But it's definitely cool to be able to provide that for
That's
clients.
super cool. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to just be a ballroom anymore, and that's what's really cool about the whole thing. Okay, so we're gonna kind of switch over to the future of event networks. The demand of connectivity is forever evolving. We need higher bandwidth, we need more devices, we have hybrid connectivity and solutions that are required for event streaming. What are the biggest trends shaping network solutions for conferences that you guys are seeing right now?
Ooh, man.
Opening my can of worms.
Yes, it's a can of worms. So, I mean, the buzzword of AI is out there, obviously. And being in engineering, it's a double-edged sword, right? It is a product. It is a technology that is able to help an engineer, and by all means, it is leveraged to help with certain things with redundancy and tracking and documenting, things like that. But it is in its infancy, and you can't buy all the hype on it. And I can tell you from experience that it is still doing a lot of learning, and it can get frustrating even trying to use it on a minimal basis. So, in the industry, from those major vendors and manufacturers, they're pushing it hard. They really want it to be, a few years ago, it was migrating to this software-defined catchphrase, which is basically just, using a point-and-click method to do network engineering. So it's kind of taking some of that built-in knowledge that's, somebody like myself or our team has over years of experience, and trying to hand that off to somebody that can just kind of read and write and guess and point and click like you're in a web browser, right? So now the AI is doubling down on that. But these big manufacturers are pushing hard for it to almost replace the human element, and it's not even close to being that ready.
Sure.
But you're going to have those companies that are going to jump in full board and have to learn that lesson the hard way. There's been plenty of examples over the years with just simple technology bumps, just even on the cellular bands, right? You had LTE come along, you had 4G come along, now you're into 5G. Each one of those iterations was billed as being, you'll never have to have internet again. You'll just be on cell phone service. You'll always have it in your pocket. And yes, it works. But I can tell you that the 5G fails in large events and in dense populations, especially when you're still in the ballroom and you've got 2, 3, 4,000 people on. LTE just does not handle it, whether it's 4G, 5G, or whatever. So, we see it a lot where those devices offload to the Wi-Fi network, and then you're doing Wi-Fi calling and data and uploading and social media on the internet still. So, you got to balance that exciting innovation with real world expectations. And if anything's taught us that, it's going to be ever evolving. It's moving faster and faster. One of our great strengths is keeping up with it, vetting it, using it, knowing its limitations, and knowing when it's ready for prime time, if you will. And I think that's from my standpoint, that's how I see the most exciting thing that could be there. But we're not there yet, so we're still doing it the old-fashioned way with the human element.
And I think that with this too, event streaming, that's not going anywhere, and it's probably more relevant now than it has been in the past. I know we have a solution. Do you want to talk about the solution that we have to make sure that stream doesn't go down?
I'll let you take that. That's definitely your expertise.
Yeah, so there's vendors out there that offer different services. So we're using one that has a pretty good footprint. They started off in more of the a first responder emergency response realm of providing that kind of mobile access connectivity for first responders. So they leverage not only the cellular carriers but also traditional telcos. So we have a solution with them that essentially you bond together, or even diverse paths over different circuits using LTE, maybe even Starlink, whatever you can get for bandwidth into a building. This device will aggregate it. You can create a VPN tunnel essentially to a central source, which we leverage Amazon for, and it just basically allows us the ability to send a stream through this device through a tunnel to Amazon. So, not to get too technical, anytime you get to the internet, you have an IP address, right? So the way we keep this kind of redundancy in place is Amazon is that IP. So no matter what we're doing or where we're at and how many different circuits or bandwidth providers we're using on this device, that IP will never change in Amazon. So if we get a failure on a device, because we do hardware redundancy, or just a failure on a particular circuit, this tunnel is always up going to that one IP address. So when you're pushing to your platform for your stream, it never changes, it never glitches, it never drops. So unless you have a complete power/internet failure at your venue, then your stream's your last concern at that point. But up until that point, we've come up with a solution to keep it as stress-free and as robust and capable as possible. And it's a really cool technology that it was a game changer because of the pandemic, and since, as you said, streaming, the hybrid events, it's definitely it's a plus one for us in our pocket to have, because there's nobody else out there right now doing that.
Yeah. And not that I've ever doubted your ability or any of our network engineers, but just listening to you speak on that topic, this is why having network partners is so important, because they can be in the room when you can't be in the room to be able to have these conversations. I want to just do some quick questions that we can kind of hit on, just to give our listeners a little bit more ammo to go into some venues. What's the biggest mistake event planners make when it comes to network planning?
I think I'll go back to what I reiterated earlier, is that you have to know that when you arrive and you're bringing in an outside ISP, that you need to kind of say who's getting priority as far as who's going to get connectivity first. Obviously, your staff needs to get taken care of. You got to make sure your production's taken care of, in what order you're going to get prioritized. And then another big one is at the end of the event, making sure that everyone knows when it's going to be turned off, because we've all ran into getting that call after we've told them we need to strike at this time because you lose the venue at this time, but you need to have a certain amount of time. And then production or someone else will call and say, why did you just turn this off? We're in the middle of this massive upload and now we don't know what to do. So planning, scheduling, all of your connectivity from my side, that's what I end up dealing with a lot. So I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think I'll do the same, is just reiterate, like, the assumptions. Don't assume the venue you're at, if you're using in-house or even if you're bringing in just somebody to consult for you, don't assume the guys in-house know the right answers to the right questions or have the knowledge to even answer it.
That's a great point. Well, speaking of having tools in the tool belt, how do planners figure out how much bandwidth they need? Because I feel like people come to me and say, we need a gig for our 300-person show. And I'm like, just because you have it at your house doesn't mean you need it here. Can we talk about this for a second?
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. It's a lot of times it's like, well, I get a gig at my house and it's, this X amount. Well, there's a scale in the background there that we run into all the time, right? Like, the AT&Ts and the Verizons of the world, sure, they're giving you $100 a month internet, but you got to multiply that by the 1,000 houses in your neighborhood that are doing the exact same thing. Yeah. So it's a little bit, it's the same backbone that we're installing on a temporary basis for 5-7 days. They've got it there. They had to do that same infrastructure build out. Yes, they have it's more permanent for them, obviously. So, the assumption that it's just as easy as it is at your house can get you into trouble.
Or let's say, hey, you have a gig at your house, but are you bringing 300 of your friends to your house? I mean, that's
if you are, I'd love to come over. I'm a really good time. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I got a gig at my house, and if I look at my stuff right now, maybe the highest I get is a couple hundred megs,
right.
And that's very specific stuff going back and forth because I work remote, right? So even if you got a gig, if you really look at what you're using at your house, you're not using a gig, and providers are hoping for that.
Right.
They're selling you that upcharge, if you will, and they know you're not really going to use it. So saying a gig is is your catchphrase, and knowing what the difference is between a gig of throughput versus a gig of bandwidth is important. Like, you want throughput at your venue. You want to be devices to roam freely, because not every device is going to the internet all the time.
Okay.
You might be doing something local in a room. So locally, you want to make sure you have as much throughput as possible. Now, once you hit the internet, then you get to that number, right? And it varies. You never know. I mean, every event needs bandwidth, but how much, what's your typical use case? How are your users using the bandwidth? Are you doing a lot of live action polling? Are you doing a lot of go to the internet and get this file so we can work on this session together? Like, those kind of things of how your sessions are going versus your attendee interaction with the internet determines what your bandwidth is. We do our basic representation. For us, I think we assume every attendee has 2 to 3 devices. No matter what they do with them could be simple as email, or it could be streaming Netflix when they're checked out of a session, right? Yeah. But I think for us, we assume 2 to 3 devices per attendee. We plan on a couple megs at any given point per those devices, and then we extrapolate that to what we think you'll need for bandwidth at a peak versus normal, operations. And it ranges.
And this is why reporting is so important as well, right? So being able to receive from the venue a report for all of your usage is something that should be standard. If they're not doing that, they should be providing that. Like, that's something that would help you for the next place, and knowing how much that you would need for that. I know that's a part of our package of what we do, is making sure that they see where the usage was by day, where they can see how many unique devices, all of those things. That's just going to help them as they continue to build their budget and everything else for every year. Okay, so don't want to go too long on a lot of these, so I'm just going to kind of go, like I said, quick before. But
sorry about that.
What's a red? What's a red flag that a venue's network infrastructure?
Don't ask me technical questions anymore.
I know. This guy over here, he's just so passionate. All right, so what's a red flag that a venue's network infrastructure might not be up to par? Ooh.
It goes back to earlier, man. I feel like we hit some of these on accident, right?
Yeah.
It's asking the right questions, having your checklist of these are the answers I need from you to know if you guys can handle our event, and then them pushing back with either I can't provide you with that information. Because if we're being honest, there's nothing proprietary about networking. Sure, you may use a different vendor.
I think people think it's like
it's
taboo.
Not,
Like,
no, it's
we
not
can't
a
talk
secret
about
sauce. It's not like,
Yeah.
you ask us, hey, how do you guys deploy one of your permanent infrastructures? Well, we use this equipment. This is the standards we use. This is the security we have online. This is our topology map.
You're not
of how
stealing
things run.
secrets. It's just that
Right.
this is what we have.
This networking is networking. Now,
Okay.
how you implement it and how you secure it and maybe some of the nuances behind the scenes, sure, you don't share that necessarily. But being able to tell a client, we use this vendor, we have this amount of equipment installed, we have this many APs, we're designed to accommodate X amount of density in certain spaces in certain rooms. If it's over that, we have a plan to augment. Like, these are real simple, non-proprietary answers that
Yeah.
can be given. A lot of times we get pushback on port maps, which is basically saying, hey, give us a map of your room and show us where your jacks are in the room. And they'll be like, oh, we can't provide you with that.
That's so wild.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's a map. I could go in there and take pictures.
Right. So it's if you get a lot of that pushback of like, oh, we're giving you too much information, then it's usually we're not really confident in how we're going to answer this to CYA, if you will. We don't want you to have too much info, because if something does happen, then you'll be like, oh, well, you guys told us you didn't have this, and that's what failed, or whatever the case might
Yeah.
be. So that's the big boogaboo for me. It's like,
That's fair.
if you can't get cooperation on your event with whoever you're using,
Wave the red flag.
that's the red flag to me.
Yeah.
I would also think another red flag is, and this might not be for every venue, but usually when the AV provider is also the IT company, that's usually a red flag, because you're not going to get the type of service that you would get with somebody that's dedicated to just taking care of the internet and IT at this property.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, our network team is focused on the network, and it's really hard to put your 5-person team over an entire event on both sides of that. Great points, absolutely. What role does cybersecurity play in event networks, and how can planners protect sensitive data? I know you want to get technical.
No, I will not get technical, right? So it's kind of a catch-22, right? So you got to kind of diverge from what a corporate mandate is when it comes to cybersecurity at your offices versus these events, right? You want the event to be ease of connectivity, so you don't want to burden users or attendees with security protocols. So you got to take kind of the approach of like the public Wi-Fi Starbucks style, right? Like, we're providing internet, but it's up to you to secure your information. So, and we know most people just click through those acceptable use policies anyway. But on the flip side,
the internet. Yeah.
right. On the flip side, though, as a provider, you want to provide some confidence level to a client that you are doing at least some basic level security of, making sure that only the people attending your conference are using your service. Nobody can just plug into a device somewhere and get onto the service and cause issues for not only attendees, but for us as the engineers and techs that are supporting it. Like, we don't want some random bad actor to be able to plug into a device and bring down your network. So there's some mitigation steps we do as a best practice on all of our events and all of our permanent properties. But you don't want to lock it down. And the biggest thing, like you brought up, was your personal information. We don't collect anything that's personally identifiable. We know maybe we might know what you named your device. It might be Corey's iPhone is on the network, and it
Mrs. Foz, not a big deal.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it has an IP address and it has a MAC address, right? Well, that's all we know. We don't know where you're staying. We don't know your room number. We don't know your address. We don't have your social security number. We have had requests where clients want to collect like sales contact information, and we discourage that entirely. One, because the process to collect that just causes another bottleneck in the network that just aggravates attendees. And most of that information you've already got from attendee registrations, right?
Sure.
So why add another layer of that? So keep it simple. Do some mitigation steps in the background that users don't have to have another roadblock to get online. And don't collect anything personal. Like we don't. We go through audits all the time to verify. We do offer products, like you said, like reporting. Live reporting is an option we have as well. And other than an email address that gets deleted at the end of your event, that's the only thing personally identifiable we get. But we never use anything for like marketing or stuff like that either. No. So we, our motto is just get you online, make it reliable, make it robust, and keep you safe without aggravating your attendees. So it's a little different mandate, like I said, from a corporate structure where you got to do all kinds of things to get online at your office, and that's not what you want to do. When
I just
you're
see you in
out
the
at an
back of
event.
my head every time that I'm in an airport and I have to get onto the complimentary Wi-Fi. I'm like, he's gonna be mad at me.
Just
Oh
get on
my
your VPN.
gosh.
Just get on your VPN.
Yeah, he's gonna be so mad at me. Okay, looking ahead, where do you see the future of conference network solutions heading in the next 5 years? You guys have a lot of experience on the backside. You've seen a lot of evolution. Where are we going to be in 2030? Isn't
I'd
that
say-
wild? 2030?
Yeah, don't.
Ugh.
I just told you how long
Yeah,
I've been in this
don't.
business.
Retired? Are we going to be retired by then?
I'm going to say just a basic thing is I feel that the virtual only events I think are starting to go away because people want to come back and get together again. I'm watching the conferences that we have starting to get very, very large. I also see that there are less and less places in the conference center for people to break away because they're still supposed to be on these Zoom meetings. They're still supposed to be able to report in, and they're trying to find little corners to go and hide so that they can get onto their laptop and make sure they're making their meetings. So I think every inch of every convention space is going to be used for people doing meetings. So you need to have Wi-Fi available everywhere.
Work
so that
hubs
they're able
kind
to
of
do
thing.
this.
I think
Yeah.
that's a huge pro tip, and I've seen it, and I've personally said it as well over the past couple of years. There is nowhere for me to get my work done.
Yeah.
And maybe it's curated that way so that you're engaged with what you're supposed to be doing, but everybody still has commitments, right? So, yeah, I think work hubs is definitely something that's going to be a major, major focus over the next 5 years. Anything to add?
No, I think Seth hit it on the head. I mean, on a technology point, I mean, there's something new every day, right? But I don't really foresee in 5 years some drastic change in event connectivity or even event dynamics as a whole. I mean, we saw it during the pandemic. Yeah, everybody went virtual. Came out of the pandemic, everybody's like, oh, we're going to stick with this hybrid thing where we're not going to really require people. Local people will come in, and then our remote workforce will stay remote and just be online and watch meetings. And I think it was quickly seen that the remote people don't engage. So the in-person events aren't changing. They're coming back, right? Like Seth said. It reminds me of, one of our leaders in the company. He's always said, like, there's just something that you lose not being face to face with somebody.
Sure.
And I think these companies and these planners see that and they know that. So the growth is going to be there. The amount of bandwidth they're going to need is always continuing to grow, even from, we're seeing small events like our beach event, a couple hundred users, and they used a good amount of bandwidth for such a small event. So that's going to be exponential. That's really the growth I see per se. I think events as a whole, how they happen, are still going to be basically the same, but the background, the logistics of it, the infrastructure of it, that's just going to continue to grow.
I want to just touch on this last thing before we kind of wrap up, but can I just bring a hotspot? Like, I knew you were waiting for it, right? Like, I didn't even tell you I was going to talk about this, but like, I get this all the time where it's like, well, we just want to boost what we have. Like, can I just use a hotspot? Can you just, for everyone, just explain the difference between a hotspot and what infrastructures we do?
Yeah, so hotspot, everybody associates to like your cell phone, right? You tether a laptop or an iPad to your phone, and you have your internet through your data plan on your cellular provider. Well, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. These iterations of cellular service from LTE, 4G, now 5G are supposed to be internet killers, and we're seeing that it just hasn't happened. And that's where your hotspot is going to fail, especially like we see a lot with the vendors that are trying to do that. Like, the vendor services are expensive. It's not just internet, for everything they use. So they try and cut costs where they can. So like, oh, we'll just, we got 3 people that are on a corporate Verizon plan. We'll just use our hotspots, right? They get on that floor and it opens first day, and all of a sudden they can't demo anything.
Right.
Because, your cellular service might be giving you data, but the way it gives you data to your device is the same signal we're using for internet. You've got your 2.4, you got your 5 gig. I don't think there's a hotspot that does 6 gig yet. But you're sharing airspace, and it's a finite amount of airspace. And if you're trying to blow up a little hotspot, you're going to lose to our infrastructure when we're blowing out with enterprise level equipment that same shared space. So it's going to create a problem for you, and it's going to create a problem for your demos. So relying on a hotspot on a show floor especially is you're gambling with your with your marketing and your sales quotas for that show.
And not even to mention the location of some of these expo floors. Like we're in Moscone and it's under the ground. Like it's like under the street is where we are. So to get connectivity for cellular there, it's, we've done projects in basements. Like there's places where cellular does not work. We've all been to a concert or a football game, maybe not Seth at a football game, but we've all been to concerts at least, and you can't upload your photo, I was at this concert because it's oversaturated. So I do think that's like one of the biggest myth busters kind of thing is just hotspot isn't for everything. It has its time and place.
No, use it at the airport. You're fine. Once you get to your show, though, don't depend on it.
We've had some people, they would brag that, oh, this has been working for me for the last couple of years, but they're bragging to all the vendors around them, and they all get the same device, and all of a sudden, it's not working.
For anybody.
Everybody's got the same device.
Don't tell your friends. Okay, so before we depart, Corey, this is NOCTalk.
Sure.
Nobody knows what knock means. So
what does knock mean?
Yeah, what is this?
Knock. It's not K. It's not a K. So it's NOC. So the industry translation is Network Operations Center. So these are not even the people you're calling when you're calling for your home internet, right? Like you get a customer support desk first. The actual knock, say with Comcast, for instance, there's usually divided in tiers. Your knock support is usually a tier 2, tier 3 support. That first phone call is always tier 1. We all hate it with the script of, did you power off your device? Did you reboot your modem?
Turn it back on.
I can't reach it. Can you turn it off and turn it on for me again? So
I'm gonna have to escalate you.
Yeah. So that escalation is usually a knock center. In our world, we do a little bit of everything, and it goes back with the reporting we provide to clients. Our knock is doing that. It's not data mining. It's data acquisition, analytics. Looking for anomalies, looking for spikes, looking for things that are abnormal in graphing, whether it be bandwidth or client associations to our gear. So in the world of knock for us as a company, it's ensuring that our permanent properties are always up, because we have service level agreements like any other provider would out there, a Verizon or a AT&T, when it comes to our hotels. And we do the same thing for our clients on the road. We provide that permanent option of infrastructure on a temporary basis. So you're getting enterprise level support, not only on site from a knock, from knowledgeable personnel like ourselves, but just because it's temporary doesn't mean it should be expected to fail.
Welcome to my tech talk. Well, this has been a very eye-opening conversation. Thank you, Seth and Corey, for joining us today. If you are an event marketer, planner, or strategist looking for seamless connectivity at your next event, we hope that you'll connect with us. But until then, this is NOCTalk. Stay connected.